Have you ever sat at a dinner table surrounded by your own family yet felt completely invisible? That was my life for 30 years. My name is Bennett, and tonight at my father's 60th birthday celebration, I am sitting in my usual spot at the corner of the table. Nobody looks my way. Nobody asks how I am doing. It is a feeling I know too well. But tonight is different. Tonight I have something in my pocket that will change everything. Tonight my 30 years of silence will finally end. Before we dive into what happened next, drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from tonight. If stories about overcoming family struggles resonate with you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you will want to stick around for this one, because what unfolded at that dinner table made my entire family question everything they thought they knew about me. Let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a modest two-story house in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio. We had a big oak tree in the backyard and a white picket fence that my father painted every spring. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. But inside those walls, there was an invisible ranking system that I never quite understood. My father, Harold, was a former military man who later became a plant manager. He valued results, achievements at things he could measure and display proudly. My mother, Linda, was a homemaker with a gentle voice, but a tendency to follow whatever my father decided. Then there were my siblings. Derek, my older brother by 3 years, was the firstborn son named after our grandfather. He came into this world wrapped in expectations and praise. Megan, my younger sister by 3 years, arrived when the family finances had stabilized. She was the baby, the princess who could do no wrong. And then there was me, Bennett, the middle child. Born during a period when my parents were struggling financially, I once overheard my mother tell a neighbor that I was unplanned. That word stuck with me for years. Unplanned, as if my very existence was an inconvenience. I discovered something when I was about 12 years old that confirmed my suspicions. I was digging through a box of family documents, looking for my birth certificate for a school project. I found ultrasound photos of Derek carefully preserved in a small album. I found ultrasound photos of Megan tucked into a decorative envelope with her name written in my mother's handwriting. But there were no ultrasound photos of me, not a single one. It was as if the 9 months I spent growing inside my mother had been erased from family history. The signs of my invisibility showed up early and often. My 7th birthday stands out as one of the most painful memories. Derek had received a massive party for his 7th birthday. There were balloons everywhere, a 3-tier cake, and at least 20 kids from his class. Megan got a princess-themed celebration with a hired clown and a bouncy castle in the backyard. For my 7th birthday, I woke up excited. I put on my favorite shirt and waited in the living room. I waited through breakfast. I waited through lunch. By dinner time, I realized nobody had mentioned my birthday at all. That evening, my mother glanced at the calendar and gasped. "Oh, honey, we will do something next weekend," she said. That next weekend never came. I started counting things to make sense of my place in the family. I counted pages in the family photo albums. Derek had 47 pages dedicated to him. Megan had 52. I had 8. And most of my photos were group shots where I stood in the corner, slightly out of focus, as if even the camera did not know where to place me. Our bedrooms told the same story. Derek had the largest room with a window overlooking the front yard. Megan had a room with a small balcony where she would sit and read. I was given the converted storage room at the end of the hallway. It had no windows, just a small vent near the ceiling. When I asked my father why I could not have a room with a window, he simply said, "You should be grateful you have a room at all." I tried everything to be seen. I studied harder than both my siblings combined. When I brought home an A in mathematics, my father barely looked up from his newspaper. "That is good," he said. "But did you hear Derek made the varsity team this week?" When I won the school science fair, my mother smiled briefly and said, "That is nice, honey. Megan has her dance recital tomorrow, so we need to focus on preparing for that." When I earned a partial scholarship to college, my family did not attend the award ceremony. It fell on the same week as Derek's law school graduation, and apparently there was only room for one celebration. The moment that broke something inside me happened at my high school graduation. I had worked so hard to get there. I was in the top 10% of my class. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I looked out into the audience to find my family. Their seats were empty, all four of them. I later found out they had stepped into the hallway because Derek had called with exciting news about a job offer. My graduation, my moment, my achievement could not compete with a phone call about my brother. But there was one person who saw me. My Uncle Raymond. My father's older brother was the only family member who ever made me feel like I mattered. He was different from my father. Quieter, more thoughtful with kind eyes that actually looked at you when you spoke. When I was 15, he gave me a book that would change my life. It was called The Intelligent Investor. I did not understand most of it at first, but I read it cover to cover 3 times. He told me something that stayed with me forever. You are smarter than all of them combined, Bennett. Just wait. Your time will come. Uncle Raymond passed away from cancer when I was 19 years old. I was devastated. He was the only person in my family who had ever believed in me. At the reading of his will, I learned he had left me $15,000. It was not a fortune, but it was everything to me. Not because of the money itself, but because it meant he had thought of me. He had seen me, and he wanted to give me a chance. That $15,000 became the foundation of everything that followed. I started reading everything I could about investing. I tracked the stock market obsessively. I made my first investment at 16 using money I had saved from summer jobs. I kept it all secret from my family. This was my world, my project, the one thing that belonged entirely to me. For the first time in my life, I had control over something. And I was determined to make it grow. By the time I graduated from college with a degree in accounting, I had turned Uncle Raymond's gift into $89,000. I took a modest job at a small company. My family barely acknowledged it. At least you have something, my father said at dinner one night, even if it is nothing special. I just smiled and said nothing. They had no idea what I was building in the shadows. The years after college became a study in contrasts. On the surface, I lived a simple life. I rented a small studio apartment. I drove a 2008 Toyota Camry that I bought used. I wore plain clothes from discount stores. I never posted on social media. I never talked about money. To everyone who knew me, I appeared to be exactly what my family believed. I was an unremarkable man with an unremarkable life. But beneath that surface, something extraordinary was happening. I lived on 30% of my income and invested the rest. I studied the markets like my life depended on it. I bought my first rental property at 25, a small duplex in a working-class neighborhood. I managed it myself, fixing leaky faucets and painting walls on weekends. By 28, I owned 3 rental properties. The passive income from rent started exceeding my salary from my day job. I kept this secret from everyone, especially my family. Part of it was self-protection. I knew they would find a way to diminish my accomplishments or ask for money while still treating me like the family disappointment. But there was another reason, a deeper one. I wanted to know the truth about my family. If I became successful, would they finally love me? Or did they only love success itself? I decided to wait and find out. It became the longest experiment of my life. Meanwhile, my siblings were climbing their own ladders of success, and my parents made sure everyone knew about it. Derek became a corporate lawyer in Cleveland. He made a 6-figure salary and bought a large house in an upscale neighborhood. He drove a BMW and married Amanda, who was also a lawyer. Every time I visited home, my father would find a way to bring up Derek's accomplishments. My son Derek, the lawyer, he would tell neighbors, relatives, anyone who would listen. The pride in his voice was unmistakable. Megan became a dentist and opened her own practice. My mother documented every milestone on Facebook. My daughter, the doctor, she would caption her posts even though Megan was technically a dentist, not a medical doctor. When Megan graduated from dental school, my parents bought her a new car as a gift. When I graduated from college, I received a card with $20 inside. Family dinners became a ritual of humiliation. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every birthday, the conversation would center on Derek's latest case or Megan's expanding practice. If anyone asked about me, the topic would quickly shift. And if I tried to share something about my life, I was met with polite disinterest at best, outright mockery at worst. I remember one Thanksgiving when I was 27. The whole family was gathered around the table. Derek announced he had just purchased a vacation cabin in the mountains. Everyone applauded. Megan shared photos from her recent trip to Europe. Everyone oohed and ahed. Then my father turned to me with that familiar smirk on his face. "What about you, Bennett?" he asked. "Still pushing papers at that little company of yours?" The table erupted in laughter. I felt my face flush with heat. "I am doing fine, Dad," I said quietly. He chuckled and shook his head. "Fine does not pay the bills, son." That night I checked my portfolio when I got home. It had just crossed $2 million. I could have bought Derek's cabin twice over. But I said nothing. I was not ready yet. The incidents kept piling up. When Derek got married, I was not asked to be in the wedding party. Derek chose his college roommate as his best man instead of his own brother. I was seated at a table near the kitchen, so far from the main action that I could barely see the ceremony. When I offered to contribute to the wedding gift, my mother waved me off. "Do not worry about it," she said. "We know you cannot afford much." When my mother needed surgery a few years later, the cost was $40,000. Derek and Megan called a family meeting to discuss how to split the expense. I was not invited to that meeting. I found out about it later when Derek casually mentioned that they had covered it. "We did not want to burden you," he explained, as if my financial situation was so dire that even asking would be cruel. I had been prepared to pay the entire amount myself, but nobody thought to ask. The Christmas before my father's 60th birthday was the final straw. We gathered as usual for the gift exchange. Derek received a Rolex watch from my parents, easily worth several $1,000s. Megan received a diamond necklace that sparkled under the tree lights. When my turn came, my mother handed me a small package with an apologetic smile. I opened it to find a pair of socks and a $25 gift card to a coffee shop. "We thought something practical would suit you better," she explained. I looked at the socks in my hands, then at the Rolex on Derek's wrist, then at the diamonds around Megan's neck. I excused myself and stood by the window watching the snow fall outside. That night, I made a decision. I would wait for the right moment, and when it came, I would finally let them see who I really was. By my 31st birthday, my net worth had crossed $8 million. By 32, it exceeded $12 million. 7 rental properties, a stock portfolio worth over $3 million, and various other investments I had accumulated over 13 years of disciplined saving and strategic investing. I had done it all in silence, without a single word of encouragement from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. When my father announced his 60th birthday celebration, I knew the moment had arrived. It would be a big event with the whole extended family present. If he was going to dismiss me one more time, let it be in front of everyone. Let it be the final answer to the question I had been asking my whole life. Do you love me, or do you only love what you think I am not? On the night of the party, I put on a simple vest, nothing flashy. I tucked a folded piece of paper into my inside pocket. It was a printed statement of my investment portfolio, $12.4 million in black and white. I looked at myself in the mirror and took a deep breath. "Tonight," I whispered to my reflection, "tonight they will finally see me." The restaurant my father had chosen was an upscale Italian place in downtown Columbus. He had reserved a private room for 25 guests. The space was decorated with banners that read "Happy 60th Harold" and golden balloons that floated near the ceiling. Crystal glasses clinked and laughter filled the air. It was exactly the kind of celebration my father loved, extravagant, showy, designed to impress. I arrived right on time and made my way to my usual spot at the corner of the table. Nobody greeted me with any particular enthusiasm. A few relatives nodded in my direction, but their attention quickly returned to the center of the room where Derek and Megan were holding court. Derek was showing off the expensive watch he had bought for our father. Megan was explaining the luxury Hawaiian vacation package she had arranged as her gift. Everyone was impressed. Everyone was praising them. I sat quietly with my water glass watching the scene unfold like I had watched so many scenes before. The invisible observer at his own family gathering. But tonight, I felt different. There was no anxiety, no desperate hope for acknowledgement, just a calm, steady patience. I knew what was coming. The dinner service began, and conversations flowed around me like streams around a stone. I heard snippets about Derek's latest legal victory, Megan's plans to expand her practice, my father's golf handicap, my mother's new garden project. Nobody asked me a single question about my life. I was background noise, furniture, invisible. After the main course, my father stood up to make a speech. He clinked his glass with a fork and waited for silence. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," he began, his voice warm with self-satisfaction. 60 years, it is hard to believe. And looking around this room, I feel so blessed. He went on to thank various relatives and friends. Then he turned to his children. "I especially want to thank my kids," he said. "Derek, you have made me so proud. A successful lawyer, a beautiful family. You are everything a father could hope for in a son." Derek smiled and raised his glass, accepting the praise like it was his birthright. "And Megan," my father continued, "my little girl, who became a doctor. Well, dentist, but close enough, right?" Laughter rippled through the room. Megan beamed. I waited. I knew what was coming, or rather what was not coming. My father's eyes swept over the table, and for a brief moment they landed on me. Then they moved on without a word. My name was not mentioned. My existence was not acknowledged. I had become so invisible that my own father could give a speech about his children and forget he had 3 of them. But the evening was not over yet. After the speeches, my father brought up a new topic. He had been dreaming of buying a vacation home by a lake, a place where the whole family could gather. He had found one he liked. The price was $650,000. He wanted his children to help contribute. Derek spoke up immediately. "I can put in 150, he announced loud enough for everyone to hear. There were murmurs of approval. "I can do 120, Megan added, not wanting to be outdone. The relatives nodded approvingly. Such generous children, such a successful family. Then my father turned to me. His eyes found me in my corner, and a familiar smirk crossed his face. "What about you, Bennett?" he asked. His tone was theatrical, designed to get a laugh. "Oh, wait, you probably need that money for rent, do you not?" The table erupted in laughter. Derek chuckled into his wineglass. Megan rolled her eyes with amusement. Even my mother smiled, though she tried to hide it behind her napkin. I said nothing. I just sat there, letting the laughter wash over me like waves against a rock. My father was not finished. He was enjoying himself now, playing to his audience. "You know," he continued, "I have always wondered where I went wrong with you, Bennett. Derek is a lawyer, Megan is a doctor, and you," he shook his head dramatically, "you are a failure, Bennett. You have always been a failure. And honestly, I stopped expecting anything from you years ago." The room went quiet. Some of the relatives looked uncomfortable. A few studied their plates, but nobody spoke up. Nobody defended me. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not sadness, just a calm, clear certainty that the moment had finally arrived. I reached into my vest pocket and pulled out the folded piece of paper. I stood up slowly, and all eyes turned to me. "Dad," I said, my voice steady, "can I say something?" My father raised an eyebrow, amused. "What? You want to apologize for being a disappointment?" A few people snickered. I walked over to where he was sitting and placed the paper in front of him. "Just read this," I said. He picked it up with a patronizing smile, expecting a joke, or perhaps a sentimental note. But as his eyes scanned the page, the smile faded. His face went pale. His hands began to tremble slightly. The room was silent now, everyone watching, sensing that something significant was happening. "That is my current net worth." "Dad," I said clearly so everyone could hear. $12.4 million. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. "I own 7 rental properties," I continued, "a stock portfolio worth over $3 million, and various other investments I have built over the past 13 years. In silence. "While all of you thought I was a failure, I watched as the information rippled through the room. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Derek snatched the paper from our father's hands and read it himself, his face turning red. Megan stared at me with her mouth hanging open. The relatives whispered to each other in disbelief. The room froze. For the first time in 30 years, every single person in that room was looking at me, actually looking at me, and I felt absolutely nothing for their attention. It had come 30 years too late. For 30 years, I said I sat at the corner of every table. For 30 years, I watched you celebrate Derek and Megan while pretending I did not exist. You forgot my birthdays. You gave me a windowless room while they had the best rooms in the house. You did not even show up to my high school graduation. I turned to my father. You called me a failure without ever once asking what I was doing with my life. I turned to my mother. You stood there and let it happen, every single time. I turned to Derek. You treated me like I was beneath you. I remember every joke you made at my expense, every single one. I turned to Megan. You rolled your eyes every time I spoke. I noticed. Every time. The silence in the room was deafening. I could buy that lake house you want, Dad, I said, returning my gaze to my father. Cash. Right now. I could put it under my name and hand you the keys tonight. My father's eyes widened with something that looked almost like hope. But I will not, I said. The hope in his eyes died. Because that house is not what you need, I continued. What you need is to understand what you have lost. You had 3 children, but you only raised 2. You only loved 2, and now you have lost the 3rd. I reached into my wallet, pulled out enough cash to cover my meal, and placed it on the table. Goodbye, everyone, I said. I walked out of that restaurant without looking back. The cold night air hit my face, and for the first time in 30 years, I felt like I could breathe. The days that followed were harder than I expected. I thought walking away would feel like freedom. Instead, it felt like grief. I was not mourning the family I had lost. I was mourning the family I had never really had. My phone exploded with messages. My mother called 47 times in the first week. I did not answer. Derek sent text after text. We need to talk. Call me back. This is ridiculous. I deleted them without responding. Megan wrote a long email apologizing for things she claimed she did not realize she had done. I read it once then, archived it. My father never reached out at all. His pride would not allow it. The first few nights were the worst. I lay awake in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment from the party. I had spent 30 years fantasizing about the day my family would finally see me, and now that it had happened, I felt hollow. The validation I had craved for so long meant nothing. It had come from shock, not love. From embarrassment, not respect. I cried more in those first 2 weeks than I had cried in the previous 10 years combined. Not because I missed them, but because I finally understood the truth. They had never loved me for who I was. They only measured worth by external success, and even now knowing about my wealth, their interest was about the money, not about me. I started seeing a therapist. It was the first time I had ever talked to anyone about my childhood. She helped me put words to things I had felt but never understood. Emotional neglect, invisible child syndrome, the scapegoat role in family dynamics. Learning that there were names for what I experienced, that other people had survived the same thing, made me feel less alone. Healing did not happen overnight. It came in small moments. A lunch with a coworker who asked how I was doing and actually listened to the answer. An evening walk through the park where I noticed the beauty of the sunset instead of being lost in painful memories. A morning where I woke up and my first thought was not about my family. I started spending time with people who valued me, a small group of friends from work who had no idea about my wealth. To them, I was just Bennett, the quiet guy who always brought good snacks to meetings and remembered everyone's birthdays. They invited me to dinners and game nights and weekend hikes. For the first time, I had something like a chosen family, people who were in my life because they wanted to be, not because of obligation or blood. 6 months after the party, I bought a house. Not a mansion, nothing flashy, just a comfortable home in a quiet neighborhood. It had large windows that let in plenty of natural light. I thought about my childhood bedroom, that converted storage room with no windows, and I made sure every room in my new house had a view. I hung a photo of Uncle Raymond in my home office. I wished he could have seen what his $15,000 had become. I think he knew somehow that I would figure it out. I decided not to cut my family off completely, but I established firm boundaries. I met my mother once at a coffee shop, a neutral territory. I told her I needed time, maybe a lot of time. She cried and said she was sorry. I told her that sorry was a start, but it did not erase 30 years. I explained that I was open to a relationship in the future, but only if things genuinely changed. She nodded, but I could tell she did not fully understand. Maybe she never would. With Derek and Megan, I chose distance. They had not reached out with genuine remorse. Their messages were about managing the situation, not about understanding the harm they had caused. Until they could look at themselves honestly, I had nothing to say to them. With my father, I made a different choice. I wrote him a letter. It was 12 pages long, everything I had ever wanted to say. Every birthday he forgot, every accomplishment he dismissed, every time he made me feel like I was worthless. I wrote it all down, every painful memory, every wound that had never healed. Then I took that letter to my fireplace and burned it. I watched the pages curl and blacken and turn to ash. I did not need him to read it. I did not need him to apologize or understand. The act of writing it was for me, and letting it burn was how I finally let go. The peace I found was not about the money. $12 million did not make me happy. What made me happy was finally understanding my own worth, independent of anyone else's opinion. I had spent 30 years waiting for my family to see me, and in the end I realized the only person who needed to see me was myself. I learned some hard truths through this experience. Your value is not determined by those who refuse to see it. Some people will only love you for what you can give them, and recognizing that is not a tragedy, but a liberation. Forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. I forgave my family in my heart because carrying that anger was too heavy a burden. But forgiving them did not mean letting them back into my life to hurt me again. I also learned that walking away is not the same as giving up. Sometimes walking away is the strongest thing you can do. It is choosing yourself. It is saying that your peace matters more than their comfort. It is finally, after all those years, refusing to be invisible. These days, I live a quiet life. I still drive a modest car and wear simple clothes. Most people who meet me have no idea about my financial situation, and I prefer it that way. I volunteer at a local youth center, helping kids who remind me of myself, kids who feel unseen and unheard. I tell them what Uncle Raymond told me. Your time will come. Just wait. And in the meantime, build something that nobody can take away from you. I sit on my porch sometimes in the evenings watching the sun go down, that old copy of The Intelligent Investor on the table beside me. The pages are worn now, the spine cracked from years of reading and rereading. It reminds me of the one person in my family who believed in me, who saw something in me that nobody else could see. I think about what family means. People say blood is thicker than water, but I am not sure that is true anymore. Real family is about presence, not just genetics. It is about showing up. It is about seeing someone for who they truly are and loving them anyway. By that definition, I did not have much of a family growing up, but I am building one now, person by person, connection by connection. If you are out there tonight feeling invisible in your own family, if you are the one who gets overlooked at every gathering, if you have spent years trying to earn love that should have been given freely, I want you to know something. Your worth is not determined by people who refuse to see it. Their blindness is not your failure. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop performing for an audience that was never going to applaud. You do not need their validation. You never did. You just need to see yourself clearly, maybe, for the first time. And when you finally do, when you finally recognize your own value, that is when everything changes. So let me ask you this. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Have you ever walked away from people who could not see your worth? I would love to hear your story in the comments below. Your experiences matter, and this community is here to listen. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who might need to hear these words tonight. You never know whose life you might change just by passing along a message of hope. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening. And most importantly, thank you for being here, for being seen, and for seeing others in return. Until next time, take care of yourself. Remember that you are worthy of love exactly as you are. And never forget, sometimes the people who feel the most invisible are the ones with the brightest light inside. Do not let anyone dim that light. Goodbye for now, and may you always find the courage to choose yourself.